This is the remastered version of the forehand and backhand grip video. I've removed the music and any extraneous information and made it easier to understand. Just a point of note here that the backhand overhead grip, which is not covered in this video, changes depending on the shuttle contact location. The backhand overhead technique is covered in a separate video. The forehand grip changes slightly depending on what shot you're playing and where you're playing it from, but the grip shown in this video is the standard forehand grip from which you should base all other variations. And the backhand grip shown in this video is for all backhands played at or near the net, whether they're underhands or overheads. Let's start by looking at the components of the racket. So there's the head, the shaft, and the handle. And then the midline separates your body from right side and left side. The forehand is on your racket side, and the backhand is on your non-racket side. Now let's look at some definitions for wrist action. So your wrist can do 4 actions. It can adduct, it can abduct, it can flex, and it can extend. So with the wrist in this position, adduction and abduction are sideways movements, and flexion and extension are up and down movements. Extension is when the wrist goes up, and flexion is when the wrist goes down. Adduction is when the wrist goes out, and abduction is when the wrist comes in. So for the forehand grip, the index finger should be used for flexion, and for the backhand grip, the thumb should be used for adduction. So for the forehand grip, the index finger is acting as a lever like this. And for the backhand grip, the thumb should be acting as a lever like this. So the thumb is in line with the shaft of the racket for the backhand. However, the location of the thumb will vary depending on the angle you're trying to produce. So an overhead is when the racket head is above the wrist. And underhand is when the racket head is below the wrist. Alright, let's take a look at the forehand grip in more detail. So for the forehand grip, your thumb needs to be in front of the handle, and your index finger needs to be behind the handle. The index finger has to be above the thumb so that it can act as a lever in order to generate power. And here are some examples of forehand shots. When you change from the forehand grip to the backhand grip, make sure that you flip the racket and spin the handle 180 degrees. You would do this from the backhand grip to the forehand grip as well. Now let's take a look at the backhand grip. For the standard backhand grip, use the flat side of your thumb and place it in line with the shaft of the racket. Remember that the location of the thumb on the handle depends on the angle of the shot you're trying to produce. All that matters is the angle of the racket head, which will determine the angle of the trajectory and whether the thumb is able to provide stability and force. As long as these two principles are adhered to, you should be able to pull off most shots using the backhand around the net. Here are some examples. Whether you're playing backhand overheads or backhand underhands, never do this. Never use flexion and extension to hit a backhand. Although there might be a little bit of flexion and extension during the backhand stroke, it is not the predominant action. As your level improves, just like in top level badminton, you'll develop how and to what extent you should use extension when hitting backhand lifts. I'm only recommending not to do this if you're only just beginning to learn how to hit backhands. And again, it is not the predominant action. The backhand is the most versatile of the two grips. This means that it can cover most areas on your forehand side and most areas on your backhand side. The racket shoulder on your forehand side is the most vulnerable area on your body. Good players will try to smash at you in this area. If you're smashed in this area by surprise, a reactionary backhand is a good way to get you out of it. It just means that you have to have good mobility in your shoulder. However, taking the shuttle on your forehand in order to protect the racket shoulder from a smash is ideal. It is critical that you learn the forehand and backhand grips and learn how to switch between the two grips. Again, make sure that you flip the racket 180 degrees. Don't use the same side of the racket for both grips. So here's a side view. I've peeled back a piece of my grip so that you can see that indeed I am flipping my racket 180 degrees. As you get better at switching the grip, you can go faster and faster. The speed with which you can change your grip will determine in part how much better you can get at badminton. Proper grip is probably the greatest hindrance for players trying to move from beginner to intermediate level and beyond. It is essentially lesson number 1, and it needs to be mastered. Do not underestimate the importance proper grip plays in executing a variety of shots with quality and consistency. Again, I'll reiterate that you should never use the same side of the racket for both grips. Always flip the racket. And again, forehand is king when you can get yourself in position. It just means that sometimes, depending on the situation, you'll have to get down really low in order to execute the shot on your forehand. In situations like this, if you don't get low and try to use your forehand, your racket will end up being horizontal and you're likely to put the shuttle into the net. So let's go over it again for good measure. For forehand, use the index finger as a lever, and for backhand, use the thumb as a lever. Flip the racket 180 degrees from forehand to backhand by rolling the grip in your hand. Use flexion for forehand and adduction for backhand. This holds true for both overheads and underhands around the net. The backhand overhead grip is different and is covered in a separate video. Practice changing the grip using overhead and underhand strokes. Go slow and make it perfect. Do not cut corners here. It will ultimately determine how good you could be. So I'll finish this video by giving you one last look at how the grip needs to change for both overheads and underhands, and wish you luck on your journey towards playing better badminton. If you like this video and you want to learn more, please subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.